Castlevania is a series of wide renown, that much is certain. The more modern games in the series have adapted a Metroid-like style in their level design, spawning the term Metroidvania. But before that, they were all simple, straightforward platformers. Let's go back and look at where it all started. Castlevania was fucking amazing. It's one of those classic games that is perfect just the way it is. But it's also damn hard, even by today's standards. The whip, which is your main weapon, have a slight delay, just enough to screw you over. Overall, the game is more about planning ahead, having great reactions and timing than it is about recklessly pushing forward. In fact, it can punish you heavily for doing so. Every time Simon, this guy, gets hit in any way, he'll do a little backwards jump. If you even happen to look in the direction of anything resembling an enemy, you can bet your sweet ass that you'll get pushed back into the nearest pit, and then it's game over. Keep in mind that during the NES era, game length was considered a problem. Usually games didn't last more than an hour, maybe two if you were lucky, and never died. So in order to prolong the game, the developers used any means possible. They made Castlevania shit hard. Despite this, it feels fair, mostly. And the seemingly negative things, whip delay, jump arcs, damage jump back, is what makes it great. It's challenging, but its design encourages learning the basics, which in turn can make you into a Castlevania master. The first time I played the game, I couldn't get past the third level. Nowadays I can complete it in approximately an hour of playtime. Simon himself never gains any levels or super weapons, well, except the sub-weapons. It's you, the player, that levels up and becomes stronger, better at playing the game. The enemy placements encourages you to use your sub-weapons to maximize the chances of surviving and progressing, which makes the replayability considerably higher. You learn patterns, secrets, and in time, you too will complete the game. An interesting detail is that at the beginning of the game, you have these film reels during the title screen, which strengthens the theory that the game is to be regarded more as a playable film, with you in the lead role. And now that I think about it, it's so clear that that's what the developers were going for, with a mix of horror-inspired enemies, like Frankenstein's monster, Medusa, and even Death himself. It's a neat little detail that adds flavor to an already interesting game. Realizing the potential of Castlevania, Konami began working on Castlevania II. Ah yes, the infamous second Castlevania game. You have all seen the videos, don't deny it. The angry video game nerd, Ego Raptor, everybody else on the fucking internet. Nobody seems to like the second entry in the series, but I disagree with them. Obviously this was an experiment by the developers. There had been a huge shift in how the game was played. The first Castlevania was simple, straightforward, but Simon's quest had been turned into something complex and vague. There were so many paths, so much dialogue, so many items, and certain tasks required seemingly random actions in order to progress. Like what the fuck? The most famous one is when you have to equip a red fucking ball and kneel in front of a huge mountainside. And guess what? A tornado dabs in to take you to the next part of the game. Like what the fuck? Not even the Greek math geniuses 200 years before Christ could figure out this shit. They calculated an approximation of the Earth's axial tilt by measuring the shadow of a gnomon during solstice. The quote-unquote hint that refers to this interaction is great. Wanna see it? You sure? Okay, here you go. Wait for a soul with a red crystal on Deborah Cliff. Okay, not bad, but I don't even know where Deborah Cliff is, for fuck's sake. And that's the biggest problem with this game, the translation. You see, Japanese kanji only takes up one tile of text, but unlike English text, it corresponds to an entire syllable, not a single letter. This means that the translation was very limited, as it had to be compressed into the same text box. This also affected the text speed, which were tuned to fit the Japanese kanji, and thus feels slower on the English version, including the famous "What a terrible night to have a curse" quote. The gameplay itself is perfect though, and that's what partly makes the game fun. I quite enjoy the darker tones that this game brings, and I like the idea of a more mature Castlevania, where you actually travel to different locations yourself. It makes it feel more like a real journey in my mind, in contrast to more recent games where you only go through the castle itself. Exactly like in the rest of the game, the night mechanic is amazing in practice, but the execution is lacking. Hearts are currency this time around, and you need them to buy various items to progress. And here comes another issue. Enemies drop hearts when killed, sometimes, and I can guarantee that you need to grind at least a few minutes. This is fine, but the enemies don't have the same smart placements as Castlevania did, so the areas you travel through aren't as memorable, despite having amazing atmospheres. And if you happen to die, which you will do sometime, say goodbye to all those hearts you collected. All of this can be fixed by one single thing that's already in the game. The mansions had enormous potential, and it being unrealized physically hurts me, okay? Imagine, if you will, the mansions being like levels from the first game, with great enemy placements and a more strategic focus instead of just being filled with cheap tricks and uninspired enemies. Not even bosses most of the time. They could have been like mini castles with their own distinct themes, that each held a secret, maybe an item or something, and they could have been slightly bigger. The issue I have with them is that they're simply underused. The second game was good, but these few things holds it back from being amazing. I still believe it gets undeserved criticism. Two years later, the series returned with Castlevania III: Dracula's Curse, and it was epic. Gone are the unnecessary grinding, gone are the RPG elements, gone are the vague dialogue, and back is the extreme frustration and self-hate gained by playing the game. Like a Castlevania game should be like. Before Konami released the game to the masses, they sent the code to Satan himself, Mr. Lucifer, Beelzebub, the devil himself, straight to the depths of hell, where he went batshit crazy with the code, and then returned a game that was twice as hard as before, based on a true story. It's without a doubt the hardest Castlevania game to date, but it's also one of the best games in the series. As mentioned, Konami discarded the RPG elements and went back to a more linear level design, aside from one exception, branching paths. Forks in the road leads you to different stages, and you get to choose where to go. Pretty neat. Another mechanic that was introduced concurrently with this was companions. There's 3 of them, and they all have pros and cons. But you can only have one at a time, so you have to make the hard decision on who to take with you. Dracula's Curse would also come to inspire the Castlevania Netflix series, which has 2 seasons already available. It's killer, by the way, you should really go and see it. The game felt fresh in the design, the visuals and the stellar soundtrack. The Japanese version, Akomayu Densetsu, I hope I didn't butcher that completely, is a completely different game compared to the US version when it comes to the music. Just take a short listen and you'll notice. This is all because the Famicom had the ability to make use of a sound extension which could add additional channels and oscillators. And this couldn't be utilized by the NES, hence the different sounding tunes. Castlevania III has a VR6 chip inside of it, and that's what makes these outstanding soundtracks. Most of the game actually takes place outside the castle at first, which I really appreciate. I like going through actual environments like forests, graveyards and caverns, not only through the castle itself. Traveling around to different locations makes the game feel more alive in some way. The gameplay is mostly the same as the first Castlevania, except for the stairs, which are your worst nightmare in this game. If you're on any form of stairs while getting attacked, you might as well start writing your will, because you will die if you're even slightly unprepared. I actually didn't play this game until last year when I bought it on the Wii store. Therefore, I only played it on the Wii U Pro controller, not the NES one, which is the preferred way to experience the game. Despite all of this, the game satisfied my Castlevania thirst for quite some time, and it made me want to get the original Castlevania III game for my NES. Probably the greatest strengths Castlevania III holds is replayability and art direction. The game looks sick in every way, in every place. The backgrounds are supreme and the assets exude that horror feeling. The music enhances every moment, and although it's tough at times, it's also very epic. Dracula's Curse is a Castlevania game done right, almost perfect even. But there's one game left to talk about. Super Castlevania IV. What do you need to know about it except that it has the best opening in a video game for that time? It is absolutely stunning. There, that's all you need to know. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope I'll see— no, I'm just joking around. The game is actually a remake, or more accurately, a reimagination of the first Castlevania for the NES. Look at it this way: Super Castlevania IV is Castlevania, but with better graphics and longer reworked maps. It could simply be named Super Castlevania instead of the 4 behind the name. It makes no sense. So we're back to the beginning, and Simon must have been hitting the gym because damn, he is ripped. This also means that the whip does a fuck ton of damage to your enemies. Perhaps too much damage at times. This and a more flexible whip, now able to whip in an astonishing 8 directions and flail about, makes the tools from former games almost useless. Like me! In the arms of the angel. Unless you want to use them for fun, and that's not something you would want from playing a video game. Let's not lie to ourselves. That's not what video games are for. They're for pain and suffering. So the whip is super effective against anything and everything, and it's probably the one thing you'll rely on through the game, which is actually fine. They also revamped most mechanics from earlier games. You can now actually control Simon in mid-air, and enemies also drop pork chops every now and then, making the opposition a bit lighter to exterminate. And you can not only crouch, but while crouching, you may also move. Simon actually functions as a normal human being now. This completely changed the outcome of the game and its difficulty. It's still hard, it's still Castlevania, it's just, well, it's not the same. The albeit small changes had enormous implications, and I wasn't sure that I enjoyed it wholeheartedly. The series from here on out would go in a completely different direction when Symphony of the Night was released for the PS1. It's still a great game, mind you. It feels good to whip shit. It feels good to be in control, and it still feels like a Castlevania game should feel like, including the fucking epic soundtrack. You know, I haven't just figured it out. I know why I believe the NES games to be greater than Super Castlevania. For it's the art style. It looks good, but it has lost that charming feeling during the transition between 8-bit and 16-bit. The older games still look amazing for the time, but never feel overbearing or serious. The tone was lighter, despite the enemy or stage designs. Super Castlevania IV was the first game in the series that had a more serious tone, and there's nothing wrong with that. It was still a light adventure, but gone were the many quirky moments from earlier games, the goofy little details like the film reel. It must sound like I despise the fourth game, but it's far from the truth. It's a great game. So let's summarize. Castlevania 1 has the edge when it comes to being simple yet fun. The high difficulty makes it a game perfect for testing your skill and eventually mastering it. Although the game length is short, every stage is full packed with smart enemy placements and beautiful aesthetics, and they never overstay their welcome. The tight soundtrack makes every moment 100 times better, and it's one of those classic video games that you should at least try once. Castlevania II Simon's Quest is like that weird cousin that wants to be different for no apparent reason. Simon's Quest had excellent ideas, and I can see the things that the developers try to do, and I appreciate them for trying. If they'd only gotten another 3 months or so, Castlevania II could possibly have been the way Castlevania games would have looked like today. I like the game, very much so. Everything is great in theory, but is lacking just a bit in execution. Well, except the iconic soundtrack and graphics. Playing Castlevania III Dracula's Curse feels like going camping with the boys, except the destination is Dracula's castle and unavoidable death. The controls were tight and the supreme music was still there, but they cranked up the difficulty because why not have even more suffering? The companion aspect is what makes this a game worth replaying several times, and it lends the game great value. If you prefer the more flexible controls and better graphics, Super Castlevania IV is definitely for you. It's a huge step between the NES and SNES in terms of technology, and it shows. Let's look at our checklist here. Great soundtrack? Check. Amazing atmosphere? Check. Outstanding controls? Double check. Magnificent bosses? Check, 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 and check. This game will definitely keep you at the edge of your seat for quite some time, if you plan to complete it. It has some serious technical marvel for the time, and it's considered to be one of the best video games of all time. That's all you need to know before playing it. The NES games have always been my personal preferred versions of the Castlevania games. The limited controls and high difficulty, paired with the amazing atmosphere and sweet 8-bit music will always be king. No matter which game you like or don't like, I know that no matter what happens in my life, if I ever feel sad, lonely, or if I ever need something to cheer me up, I boot up Castlevania. It has become tradition to play it during Halloween or whenever I feel like Dracula needs to be put to sleep again, and it's something I will never forget.